Hey, YouTube family, and welcome to the Kevin Strong Show. And in this video, we're going to talk about how young Americans feel that the American dream is just out of reach. There's an article that talks about that. We're going to go over it. I'm going to give you my little editorial 2 cents about the article. And then I'm going to give you some recommendations that I think young people should consider, and maybe some of us older people should consider if we're still, quote unquote, chasing the American dream. And finally, last but not least, we're going to do a recap on my recommendations for stock picks last week. And I'm going to give you my recommendation from what I'm going to be following the next week, starting next week. So if you're new to the show, welcome. Start off by doing me two things. Smash the like button. If you're not a subscriber, if you're new to the show, consider subscribing by hitting the button. So without further ado, we're going to go over here and slide over to this article. And the title of this article is Younger Americans Less Likely to Believe the American Dream is Still Possible. Some of the bullet points of this article talks about fewer adults in the United States believe that the American dream is true anymore. The second bullet point talks about there was a survey that said basically 39% of young adults think the American dream is still possible. So obviously 60% say they just don't see it being possible. And older Americans, white Americans, and those with high incomes are more likely to believe they have already achieved the American dream. And last but not least, as I said, about the 60% here, it basically talks about that 60% of US adults below the age of 50 believe the American dream is dead. So the article talks about how these young adults under the age of 30 are very pessimistic. 39% still think that the American dream is possible. The other 60%, as I previously stated, said that, hey, just no way that they can ever see themselves securing the American dream. And how do we define the American dream, right? That was typically getting a job out of high school or going to college. You heard this traditional thing that was said by the famous Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad about getting out of high school, going to college, saving your money, and just working and just dying, right? That robotic lifestyle that was laid off, that's been programmed into all of us for the most part since the beginning of school, right? About getting good grades and how that was some kind of litmus test to determine whether or not you are going to be successful. This thing goes on to say ages 50 to 61 are far more likely to believe in the American dream. Among those US adults, 61% think achieving the American dream is still possible, while 35% believe it was once possible, and 3% think it was never possible. So I think this statement right here has a lot to do with where you are in life, what's your economic status, your wealth, and your income. And also, obviously, in relationship to debt, do you have unmanageable debt, or do you have what I call this serviceable debt? Debt that you can maintain and pay comfortably on a monthly basis and still have a work balance lifestyle. That's the optimum way to have it, because no one can, quote unquote, be debt free. That's impossible, right? You still have property taxes, insurance. You still have to pay for food. Now, those are point of sale transactions where you incur debt and then you pay it off at the register, but yet still you have to spend money to function, right? So there's no way to be, quote unquote, debt free, but you do want to get to a point where you are being able to comfortably service debt. And I think that's the sweet spot that most of us are looking for, or should be looking for. Going a little bit farther down here in the article, it talks about roughly 64% of upper income Americans believe the American dream still exists, compared to 56% of middle income. Because once again, the second statement that I'm reading now speaks to what I just said previously. So the more money you have, the more optimistic you are, right? Conversely, the less money you have, the less optimistic you are. You're probably more inclined to think about whether you lean to the left or lean to the right, that candidate is going to have some kind of magic solution that's going to cure all of your problems. And your problems and your solutions, ladies and gentlemen, are always in the mirror. I've said this before, but I haven't said it in a long time, so I'm going to say it again. If you push away the left and you push away the right, everything will be all right. Politics is very, very, very difficult to talk about. It's a gaslighting subject for most people in this country. And for some people, this may tick a lot of you off, but I'm going to say it. For some of you, it's just an excuse because you don't want to come out of your comfort zone. You're scared of the unknown. Some of us are lazy, so we don't want to come out of our comfort zone. So a lot of times politics is like religion. It's a convenient excuse to justify why you haven't maximized your potential, why you haven't self-actualized, or there's all these external forces that are working against you that's preventing you from achieving your goals. And I will be the first to concede, yes, at times there can be certain laws and city codes and federal guidelines that could make it a little bit more difficult. But at the end of the day, Democrats come and Democrats go. Republicans come and Republicans go. We've had Republican presidents, we've had Democrat presidents. So it's all over the spectrum. So to sit back and say because of the next 4 years doesn't go my way, and because of that, I can't achieve A, B, and C, and D, I don't subscribe to that. I think that's a cop-out attitude. I think you need to look yourself in the mirror, come up with a reasonable plan, put some time frames around that, and make sure you surround yourself with someone who's going to push you outside of your comfort zone. And you'd be amazed how your life will change. So before we get into the stock portion of this is some of the things that I think is going on with some of the younger people. And some of this applies to the older folks that if they use this, it's probably a good benchmark to start turning their life around and heading towards how they define their own American dream. Reduce and limit debt. And I talked about that in the article. I think that's important. That's why I am not a fan of going to college if you're going to incur a substantial amount of debt. It just doesn't have the same impact that it once did. When I went to school, I didn't graduate until I was like 30. So I was considered a non-traditional student. But back then, a college degree meant something. A lot of the jobs, a lot of good paying jobs had a prerequisite that required that if you didn't have a 4-year degree from an accredited university, you couldn't even apply for the position. I mean, it wasn't even about, were you a good salesperson or could you convince the person who was interviewing you to give you an opportunity and how you would show value to the company. This was a litmus test. These were certain check boxes that you had to check off. And one of those prerequisites was a 4-year degree from an accredited university. That's no longer the case, but yet and still, a lot of us are in this mindset that we think, hey, you got to go to school. And I just don't think that's necessary. I know there's a lot of people who said, are you going to be a doctor? Maybe that helps. But hell, I have a family member that, I've said this before, he just calls it a grind. He's done very well for himself. He's financially independent. But if you ask him, was he happy about practicing medicine? He'd tell you, hell no. It's just a grind. Very few of us find happiness. The unemployment rate, ladies and gentlemen, is getting ready to kick up. And this is another reason why I'm not an advocate of incurring any type of student loan debt, because I think this next recession is going to be deep, long, and wide. And the typical, I think, recession lasts around 18 months. I think this easily can go from 24 to 36 months, or it could be a quasi-depression. So I think we're heading into unwatered territories in terms of how bad the economy is going. I think 27% of people said that they're skipping a meal because they just don't have the money to pay for food. 27% of Americans. Stagflation, I think, is something that we're going to have to deal with on the horizon, and wages not keeping up with inflation. So what are some of the solutions I think you could do? Look at the trades, whether you're younger or old. I know it's not sexy, but plumbing, electrician, and things like that can give you a very decent hourly wage. It's good work. And if you have an entrepreneurial spirit about you, learn from the baseline, work your way up, and branch out and eventually run your own company. A lot of things are being taken over by AI. My recommendation is that you might want to consider getting a license in a specialized field, something that requires a license, because that type of job or that type of profession that requires a license is less likely to get outsourced overseas. Right? Whether, I have a mortgage license and a real estate license. I mean, obviously you don't need a real estate license to sell real estate, but if you're transacting and doing mortgages and stuff like that, if you're not working for like, federally chartered or a bank or something, you're a mortgage broker, then you're gonna need a license. Well, you can't outsource that. You have to have that license. Now, mortgage loan officers aren't making any money now, but I'm just giving you two examples of find something maybe that you're interested in that requires a license. Does that mitigate you from being unemployed and being thrown out? Absolutely not. But it's just that one extra layer of protection that you get that gives you a little bit more job security. So consider that. And finally, roommates, especially when you're young, or if you do decide to go to college and you want to be able to tackle that debt when that first payment kicks in, when you graduate from college 6 months after graduation. You're used to probably living in a dorm. You're probably used to having roommates. So your mindset is a little bit more open and flexible to share living spaces. So that could be a great opportunity for you and your classmates or someone else to maybe share or rent a house or rent an apartment and use it as a way to reduce your monthly expenses. Take that extra money and apply it towards your debt to keep your debt down, because debt is the issue here, ladies and gentlemen. We all know that. I always used to say, keep your credit score up and your debt down, because when you don't have debt, you can take chances. And I think when you're young, that's the opportunity for you to throw caution at the wind and just go for it, and just absolutely go for it. Finally, before I slide over to the investment portion of this video thing, there was a famous book called The Millionaire Next Door. Some of you've heard of it. So basically, it's about how these people live well below their means and accumulated millions of dollars. Contrary to popular belief, I think 2/3, because I read that book twice, but I haven't read it in a while, 2/3 of the people that this author or the authors interview for this book called The Millionaire Next Door, 66% have college degrees. The problem with that is that that's anecdotal information, right? At the time, I don't know when that book first came out, maybe the early 2000s, but those people probably had already had established careers back in the 90s by the time the book came out when he was interviewing. So when you think about that, once again, it goes back to what I said earlier. You've got to frame things on past, present, and future. You have to understand that wages aren't keeping up with inflation. All these other macroeconomic factors come into play, opposed to just being a parental parent saying, hey, I'm sending my kid to school, and you're not factoring in all of this. You could be setting them up for failure and not realize it. So let's go ahead and slide over here, ladies and gentlemen, and talk about the stock. So last week, I only gave one recommendation, and I said that it was going to be silver, which was, I always screw these dates up, but let's get over here to Friday, which was the 28th. And silver was at $26. And I said, hey, probably Monday afternoon, go back and look at the video so you guys know I'm not revising history. I said silver, stock symbol SLV, looked like it was going to do well. And guess what? It popped. Once again, if you're doing options, like what I like to do, and you took an option out on something like this and it goes up just a couple of dollars, that is a very, very, very nice return on your money. Easily, 30 to 40% in just 2 days. The other thing that I talked about was Tesla. And what I said about Tesla was that last week I said I wasn't sure. I said I probably would stay away from Tesla because I thought there was a chance that it could hit this red line, which is a 200-day moving average. And I said, if it kind of exhausted itself, it could potentially roll over. But I also said, once again, go back and listen to the video. I said, hey, if this thing goes above the red line and establishes support, it's going to go much, much higher. And boy, did it. Now, I didn't jump on this particular trade, but if you jumped in on an option at around 208 or 207 right here where that red line is, and you took out an option and that thing's now trading at 251, that's a lot of money in a week. A lot of money, like a lot of money. So the other thing I am probably looking at from my own personal standpoint, once again, this is not financial advice. You do your own due diligence and make your own stock picks. Visa has gotten beaten down quite a bit. And as you can see here, up here, you see where it says sell, sell, sell. And if you go back a little further over here, this is April 24th. You see these 4 sell signals up here? That's a top. So for some reason, Visa just can't get above around 279, 280. It came down, and this red line here is the 200-day moving average. It bounced off the 200-day moving average, which typically means that's a support level. And I think there's a good opportunity for this thing to pop up a little bit. So I'm going to probably look at that Monday, late afternoon. And if it's still rising a little bit, I'll probably be in that trade for a couple of days. And last but not least, so Visa's the one I'm looking at to be in for a couple of days. And somebody had emailed me and said, can you talk about Bitcoin? Do I have Bitcoin here? So this is tough. It looks like it's going down. It's below the 200-day moving average. My gut tells me that there's more room to the downside, probably low 50s. And where do I get that from? You look over here. Slide this over here. I just think it's going to settle somewhere around 50. Oh, this thing didn't jack me up now. Hold up. I didn't mess that up. Oh, no wonder I'm on the wrong damn thing. All right, here we go. So I'm saying 52. I think it's going to settle somewhere right in here. See this where my mouse is way over here? Sorry, guys, this took a while. I'll give you a chance to catch up. So my mouse is already over to the left of the screen. You see all this movement here, all these candles. These are daily candles, just a consolidation period. There's nothing here. See that? It's empty air underneath that. So if this thing continues to go down, I don't think it's going to settle out or reestablish a new bottom until right here. So that's around $51,000, $52,000 for Bitcoin. How long it will take to get to that, who knows? Bitcoin moves very rapidly. But if it settles in at 51, 52,000 and starts to reverse up, that's probably as low as it's going to go. And it's probably going to go up between now and election. Once again, I'm not giving anybody any financial advice. That's just my personal opinion. Please do your own research or consult a financial planner if you're considering investing in stocks, bonds, or mutual funds. Oh, I should have showed you TLT, but I'll do that next week. I also made, I think, 20% on that. Let me go back to this, see if I ever can bring that back up. I should say that. So yeah, this is one, everybody who follows the world economic landscapes knows about Japan and how they're dumping U.S. treasuries and how that's putting pressure on the bond market. So they're gonna have to raise those prices or whatever to attract yield. It's just a hot mess. So basically, as you can see here, for those of you who follow me, see, this is what they call a double bottom. No pun intended, especially coming from Washington. So you can see here, it passed that red line, the 200-day moving average. Here looks like it wants to start to curl up. I was in this earlier, I made a 17% profit in 2 days. I might jump back in this thing Monday and put a lot more money into it, because I think in the long run, one of the most explosive stocks that you can look to do well in when the Fed decides to finally cut interest rates is TLT. Book it. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Not giving financial advice, but that's something that I'm going to seriously do once the Fed decides to lower interest rates. I'm definitely going to double down and take out some long options on the symbol TLT. So that's going to do it for this particular edition of the Kevin Strong Show. Like I said, a lot of early Americans and young Americans are just not optimistic about their future. And you have to have these hard conversations with them about the best way to navigate through these hard times, because it could be years before we get any resemblance of a stable economy once we start going down this road. Like I said, the unemployment's at 4.1%, and that 4% is that magic number. I could have pulled up a chart and showed you once you get to that level, then it just skyrockets after that. So there's definitely hard times coming, and you need to keep your debt down, keep it manageable, and think outside the box when you think about, hey, should I maybe delay college for a couple of years, or should I consider a trade or get a license in something to hedge my bet, or use it as a fallback plan? So in the event my primary plan doesn't work out, I can get a supplemental job doing something else because I have this license in my back pocket. So that's going to do it for the Kevin Strong Show. If you enjoyed this edition of the show, please hit that like button. It does help me out. I know a lot of people don't do it because sometimes I don't do it, but click that like button so YouTube will circulate this video to other YouTube viewers. And if you have not subscribed and you are enjoying my content, hit that subscribe button so you do get notified when I release my videos, which is typically on a Saturday morning. Thank you guys for the time, and I'll see you in the next one.